Hello, my name is Shirley Foxnose, City Clerk for the City of Tampa, and this is Tampa's Oral Histories. Tampa's Oral Histories is a production of the City Clerk's Office and City of Tampa Television. The purpose of the Oral Histories is to capture memories of individuals who have made an impact on our city. The Oral Histories will be part of the city's archives. Today we have the oral history of Catherine Barja, a trailblazer and the first woman elected to Tampa City Council. She is also the 2013 recipient of the Josephine Howard Stafford Memorial Award. Mrs. Barja has many memories of Tampa and of City Council and has much to tell. So without further ado, let's hear from Catherine Barja. Mrs. Barja, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. Let's get started with some questions about your background, and then we will move on to your time in office.
Okay.
Anytime.
So,
What do you recall about your childhood?
well, let's see. I guess we'll start with a little bit about, I sometimes joke when people say to me, Kathy, where were you born? And I say, New York City, in Bellevue Hospital, where all of the, it's very well known for its psych ward. But it was a teaching hospital, and yeah, that was one of the big things that it was known for, but it also had a large maternity ward.
Okay. Well, where did you go to school?
Well, I started out, first grade was, we lived in Coney Island at the time. New Yorkers, if you live in New York City, you tend to move around quite a bit. And I started out in Catholic school from Our Lady of Solace Church, which had the school attached, along with the church. And we had, at that time, we were taught all by just the nuns. They didn't have any outside teachers other than nuns like they do today. And it was interesting. Of course, they were kind of off, shall we say, off 6 months from the Florida school cycles. So when my family moved to Florida, I was in a kind of forced position. I either had to go ahead 6 months or go behind 6 months. No choice. Well, I went ahead 6 months. I still, in many ways, were certain subjects I found extra easy going to Hillsborough High School in my 10th grade, because most of the things they taught I already learned in the 8th and 9th grade in New York. But
So you were ahead.
yeah. Well, when I started in school, the Sister Superior told my mom, she said, well, she's awfully young. We usually don't take students till after 6 years old. And of course, I was only 5 years and 4 months old when I started school. And my mom told Sister, she said, well, the Sister Superior, she could write. She said, I'm not talking about printing. She said, she can write cursive. She writes her whole alphabet, large letters, capital letters and small ones. And she can do simple math, and she can read some.
So you were just ahead of your time all the way around.
Yeah, I started ahead of time. And it was there uh, I had the end of the first grade, right at the end of the school year, I wound up in the hospital with a bad case of measles. And I was there for 3 weeks in the hospital. And, well, came back and went into the second half of first grade, and I no longer sat in the front of the classroom because I was an easy kid to handle at the time. Didn't disturb the class, and And so one day, sister turned around and she wrote a sentence up on the blackboard, and it was real simple to read. And she happened to call, Catherine? Yes, ma'am. Please read the sentence on the blackboard. And Catherine sat there. I couldn't see the sentence on the board. And so sister was pretty sharp. She said, okay, just stand there for a minute. And she wrote something else on the board. And she knew it was things that if I was sitting there reading, with the printed material, I would be able to read it, because you know how they even do today. First, second, third grade usually has larger letters than when you get into the later grades. So she wrote this other sentence, and Catherine, now I want you to read what I just put on the board. Well, couldn't do it. She said, okay. She said, I want you to walk up the aisle towards my desk. She said, and when you think you can read those letters, read what I've written on that board, you let me know. Just stop where you're at and read it out. Well, I walked up and I was very close to the front of her desk. And wow, I could see the letters. And so I was able to read. And that's when she wrote home a note to have Mom take me to an eye doctor, and that's when I was first diagnosed with macular degeneration.
Okay. So it was in the first grade?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. What do you remember best about your parents?
Oh, God. I guess the fact I took part in everything that went on in the house, in the whatever, where my daddy would take me out and he would be maybe going shopping to buy himself a new pair of shoes. Well, you can imagine what happened. Oh, Daddy, look, they were pretty. Oh, how pretty those little girls' shoes are. And a lot of times, Daddy came home without the pair of shoes for himself, but I always had a new pair. And they challenged us, both my brother and I. Well, my brother was old enough that, he was starting at school age, and same way. Whatever you think you can do, go for it. So consequently, both of us got into all kinds of mischief, but yeah, we tore things up and built things and just basically got into lots of problems.
Okay. What did you do in your spare time growing up?
I'll give you a good idea where we lived in New York at the time. We had moved from Coney Island and we lived in Harlem. I changed schools to public school in the second grade. And down the street from us was a big 4-story recreation building that was run by the city of New York. And they had all kinds of classes there, after school classes. And from 3 in the afternoon till 5 in the afternoon, you had to sign up at the door when you came in so they knew where you were going to be. And you could take classes in painting or modeling clay. Up on the 3rd floor, they had every kind of game. They had, for the bigger children, they had pool tables and ping pong tables, and you check out jacks or pick up sticks or board games. There were activities to keep the children off the street, out of trouble, but in a safe environment. They had a library that you could go and read. I was a lot into the artwork from way back. The only problem with this is you have to imagine this. Here's the school, and you come out this side of the street, which was 105th Street, between 1st and 2nd Avenue, and where we lived was on the 1st floor right across from the school. So didn't have to walk very far to go to school. You go out the back side of the school, and our church, St. Lucy's Catholic Church, was right there. And twice a week I was supposed to go over to St. Lucy's after school and study for my confirmation classes. Well, I generally made it there once a week and skipped the other time. And where would I be? Up at the recreation center, skipping. Didn't skip school, but I used to skip my catechism classes. Until it was almost time we were going to make confirmation on Mother's Day. And the pastor, kind of odd kind of guy, not old, not young, Father McAvoy. And he came up with, now I want you to take this note home, parents, because I need to talk to one of your parents. Okay, you know, I'm gullible. I don't read the writing. It's addressed to Mom and Dad, so I take it home. And my dad, of course, was working during the day, so Mom went over to see Father McAvoy. And he said, "Did you know that your daughter's been skipping half of her classes?" No, she didn't know. So I was kind of in a little bit of trouble. Now I'm going to show you a little bit of psychology to the way the Catholic Church works here. He wanted to know how long my mom and dad had been married, the whole history, you know, and what church were they married in. And he found out, Mama wasn't Catholic. Mama was Protestant. She went to the Anglican church. And when Dad and Mom got married, it was in her family's church. And so Father McAvoy said, okay, we're going to test this young lady, and if she can answer all the questions, then we'll let her make her confirmation with the rest of her class. If she can't answer the question, then she'll have to study again next year, repeat this class. But he said, in the event that Catherine can answer all of the questions in the catechism that she needs, here's what's going to happen. Did you know that when you married your husband in the Protestant church, that he no longer was entitled. He could come to Mass anytime he wanted, but he lost his rights of having Holy Communion. So what's going to happen is we don't need nothing big or fancy, and you don't need to have all these witnesses, and you don't need a new marriage license, but you're going to come in with your husband and get remarried by me, and I'm going to make sure it's done. And that's what happened. As far as the catechism book, well, he could open any page he wanted to and ask any question. If it was in the book, I knew the answers verbatim because I committed everything to memory.
When did you move to Florida?
In 1946. My mom came down first to Tampa. My dad had made 2 trips to Florida because the doctor had told my dad the year before, in 1945, that if we did not get my mother into a warm climate, that she would not last another year in New York's cold climate. She suffered very severe problems with rheumatic fever, and it affected her heart. And well, not too often that you have a doctor come to the house 3 times on Christmas Day. He didn't think my mom was going to make it through the day. So yeah, it was reason to move. So, and Dad says, doctor says we go, we go. Yeah, we did.
What was the community like when you were growing up?
Oh.
Or where did you move to?
Well, when we first, we sold our house after the doctor said we had to, move to a warm climate, because that was the first house my mom and dad ever owned. And we sold the house, and we moved to Hastings on the Hudson, which was only going to be a very short time till we could get located in Florida. And Dad looked first in the Miami area, then in Jacksonville, then he sent my mom to Tampa because he heard that Tampa was more of business-oriented rather than tourist-oriented, and he felt like that he could come out better and, make a better living here in Tampa.
What was your father's occupation?
Yeah. Actually, he worked on the big ships. I don't, when I was very young, Mom and Dad had at one point a fruit and vegetable stand, and then when I started school, we had a candy store, sold candies and gum and cigarettes and cigars, and in the summertime, my dad used to work with these big 50-pound cans of ice and stuff, and you have the ice with the rock salt around the edge, and handmade, no machines. But he used to make the Italian ices in all different flavors. Worked out pretty good. And but once the war began, he had taken some training in working on boilers, heat and cold type of insulation. And he worked on the conversion of when they took some of the big ocean liners and big freighters and converted them into troop ships, which at the time they called Liberty ships. And he got to where he was foreman on the job, and he could read the blueprints, and he could direct, and he taught a lot of others that came in as beginners. He taught them the trade. And I can give you a name of somebody here in Tampa that my dad taught the trade to when he came in, when we moved to Tampa, and he's now a judge, had been in the legislature for a long time, and real close to my dad and family before I ever got married, and that's Elvin Martinez. You know, it's just the way things work. But he was one of the folks that my dad taught how to do all the insulation. Okay. And you talk about work. That man, during the wartime, it was like not just double shift. There were sometimes he's supposed to work an 8-hour day, and you know, it was common, the 16 hours. There were times when he worked 24 hours around the clock. They'd send him home to sleep for 8 hours and come back and do another 16-hour shift. It was work that had to be done, you know, because they wanted those ships ready to roll and take our guys and our equipment overseas as soon as possible. So it was always rush, rush, rush.
You say you just have one brother, right?
I had only one. My mom lost one between my brother and I, which would have been a second brother. Okay. But he was stillborn.
Okay. Did your family have any special traditions, such as things you did on holidays or birthdays?
Oh, well, birthdays, especially the kids' birthdays. We always had birthday cake and had some family members. When we were in school, we got to invite our, you know, kids from school, whoever we wanted, any of our friends. We always had that. And it was, there were some special traditions. Thanksgiving, everybody met out on Long Island at my great-grandmother's house. It was like a big reunion. And it was all my mother's family and her aunts and uncles and, you know, that end of the family. Other times, we always went Christmas Eve. We all met down at my Aunt Mary and Uncle Joe. They lived in the same house along with my great-grandmother and great-grandfather on my dad's side. And we all had Christmas Eve dinner and got together, went to midnight mass, and then got to go to our home, and magically, there was no such thing as having a Christmas tree up before Christmas Eve. Magically, we'd be off over, you know, visiting, and then going to mass, and kids came home, and wow, there was the Christmas tree, and everything appeared. And it was strange when we moved to Florida and people were having Christmas trees up, you know, right after the 1st of December. It was strange, but yeah, and we all got together, mostly my dad's side of the family and my mom's side of the family, for New Year's. Now, we didn't go down to Times Square and all that stuff, but it was always done at one of the other's homes that had enough room for the family to kind of have a gathering of both sides. Christmas, Easter, all of the major holidays were something special. Flag Day and the 4th of July, you know, We always had had to put the flags up on certain holidays and Labor Day. But my family celebrated all of the holidays.
Oh, that's wonderful. Would you consider Tampa back then to be a small town, or was it a city when you moved and growing up?
When I first came to Tampa, it was probably not much bigger than Plant City. And I'm talking about Plant City probably 10 or 12, 20 years ago, when Plant City was small, because it's growing pretty good now too. It was a little bigger than what then was the city of Temple Terrace, but it was more like small town.
Oh, it was small town. Everybody knew everybody else.
Yeah, pretty much everybody knew everybody else. And of course, the city line ended, you went across Nebraska Avenue Bridge and you were in Sulphur Springs, and that was Hillsborough County. The river, Hillsborough River, divided between the city and the county. And that was the end of the bus route was right there in front of the old Springs Theater. As far as we had 3 buses that served North Tampa then. There was Nebraska and Florida Avenue bus, but we had one going down Central Avenue. Used to come up to the Springs Theater and circle around 9th Street and come back up on Nebraska over the bridge, and on that first through street, which I believe is Hamilton or Hamilton Heath, used to cut through to Central Avenue and all the way up, and I used to get off to go to Hillsborough High School, which of course was on Wilder and Central Avenue. And I had my bus driver trained. He'd come around, the timing of the bus timed just so that I could get in front of Hillsborough High School when the bell rang. And he used to come around to make his loop, and he'd stop the bus in front of the house we were at, blow the horn, "Kathy, it's time to go." And yeah, it was time. And I'd say, "Oh, I'm not quite ready yet. I got to do this." "Okay, hurry up, get it done. We got to go." And man, you don't usually get that kind of service. But yeah, and that's when Heartline, as we know it today, was Tampa Transit Lines. And it was a private company. And there was no school buses, no school busing anywhere. I mean, you might have qualified today if you lived a certain distance from a school, then you'd get picked up by the school bus. But it didn't matter. You could be 5 miles outside of the closest school to you, and it was up to your parents or somebody to get you there one way or the other, even if it was your own 2 feet. And I used to walk from what is now Bush Boulevard, then called Southgate, a sand street, all the way down to Florida and Waters, which was like 13 city blocks or so, to catch the bus to go to school when we moved to Forest Hills.
That was a long distance.
Yeah, it was. But hey, that's what the choice was once Mom and Dad moved from the little house that we were renting by the Springs Theater, and she bought that little house up on Southgate. So.
Okay. Now, after graduating from Hillsborough High School,
Yep.
you had your first job. What was your first job, and how did you get that job?
Okay. Well, I had first tried to get a job and I wished I hadn't been so stubborn at the time. But after school, my hobby in the afternoon was hopping on the bus out of school and going downtown Tampa, and walking down Cass Street down by the river. Used to have a big tower there, and it was WALT radio. And I used to go down and hang out and on the weekends, I'd hang out down at the radio station. Got to meet different dignitaries that came in, different bands, people from the Grand Ole Opera, you name it. I had a chance to meet all these people. And my idea was, oh yeah, when I graduate high school, I'm gonna go into radio. I'm gonna get me a job, and I'm gonna be able to go on that radio and be a disc jockey, and yeah. So, upon graduation, I bopped down to the radio station, and it was owned by a single gentleman, one family, and Mr. Tyson, Walt Tyson. That's where the WALT came from, was from Walt's first name. Anyway, Mr. Tyson was very courteous and nice with me, and I told him I would like to have a job, and I would like to work for his radio station. And I knew how to file all the discs because I'd helped the people that worked there do a lot of that stuff, just volunteer time. And so he said, the first thing he told me, he says, okay, you can handle telephones and do that kind of stuff. You know, he offered me a job as receptionist and helping to put the records back away and stuff like that. Oh, I can do all that, but that's not what I want, Mr. Tyson. I said, what I'm looking for is somebody to train me, and I don't care if you don't even have to pay me to start with until I learn. I said, but I want to learn how to be an announcer, to do all the commercials, and how to handle all the machinery, the equipment, how to handle the control room, transfer the voice from the studio back to the control room, whatever. And he looked at me real serious and said, now I'm gonna be very frank with you. I will never hire a female to go on the air ever. And he didn't have any females in that position. Now he had one that wrote a lot of the commercials and helped sell advertising. And then he had Wilma out at the front desk, and she acted as receptionist, and he was going to put me on as her helper. And Kathy didn't have enough sense to say, oh yes, thank you, sir, and get my foot in the door. Kathy said, well, no thank you. I want to learn how to handle all the machinery and do everything. I don't want to just sit and answer phones and file records. I already can do that. And so, but I did then. I went down to Florida State Employment, and I got a job out at 22nd and Osborne. Used to be a cabinet making shop there. And what was Kathy doing? Answering phones and filing papers and doing secretarial work. But only had to do that for a short time. In the meantime, I had met my husband at the old tourist club. And it was Mom's birthday, and we had a big birthday cake, and we had lots of friends because my folks used to go all the time to the dances there when Dad was in town, and then when otherwise, but they decided once I had graduated high school, there's no reason why I shouldn't learn to dance and get out and meet. There's some people were young and some were older. Well, that's where I met my husband, and he came over and looked at that. He says, "Wow, is that a homemade cake?" And I, "Yep. Can I have a little piece?" And next thing you know, we danced together several times, and then he asked me to go out on a Sunday. I had a cousin that had moved into town and was at the same dance, and I introduced Fred to my cousin and said, "Well, if you got someone that we can do a double date." I really hadn't, dated that much. So we double dated, and we went to, our first date was over to the Centro Estiano, down on 9th Avenue and Nebraska. And upstairs, every Sunday, they had the little tea dances for the young people. And good big orchestra, all kinds of ballroom dancing. Yeah. And the next thing, Fred asked me to marry him, and I was very much, yeah. He was tall and handsome and mannerly, and my dad turned around one day, and my dad says, "Well, son, you want to marry this girl, there's going to be one thing that I'm going to require before this happens." He says, "She's not used to running a household on her own. She's not used to working and being responsible for running, seeing that bills are paid and running such things, and she needs to learn how to take care of money and how to budget things." And he says, "She's going to need to work. She'll work a long time, but she's going to have to work for a while." So we planned everything, and we were married on the 31st of December. And when Daddy put his foot down, that's when I went to see about getting the job where I worked at the cabinet shop, and worked there right up until the time I got married.
Okay. Very good.
Yeah.
And you have children?
Oh, yeah. Got 3 children. 2 boys that are the older 2, and my daughter, who's the baby. And between them, I've got 8 grandchildren, 6 boys and 2 girls. And I now have 8 great-grands, and they're all boys except for 1 little girl, a little 7-year-old now. And the oldest of the great-grands is 13. Actually, next month he'll be 14. And I'm going to tell you, that little 7-year-old girl runs herd on all of them boys, the ones that belong to her mom and dad, and the ones that belong to Uncle JJ's too. She runs herd on all them boys, and anything that they do, she thinks she can do. It don't matter where it's climbing or whatever, kind of playing soccer or, she's right in the middle of it.
Okay. Which significant historical events took place during your lifetime?
Oh my Lord. There were some good things historically, and there were some heartbreaking events. I think the visit by President Kennedy when he came to Tampa, and my husband and I got a chance to talk to him one-on-one, and he came over to us and treated us like we were members of the family. And that it meant so much. And when I say also some bad things, because my husband told me right there, he says, just look at this. Where are all the people that are supposed to be guarding the president? They were out smoking by the door behind the stage, and he was up there. He didn't know us. He just came over and started talking like we'd been friends all his life. And my husband said that anybody who wanted to hurt this man could. And 4 days later, he was gone. And that was probably one of the worst things historically. And then, of course, what happened to Martin Luther King, and then right after that, Bobby. It just, because we almost felt like, with the way he acted, it's like we were part of his family. And strangely enough, there was a show on A&E that did a historical piece on Rose Kennedy, the matriarch, and going way back in their history on Rose Kennedy's side of the family was related to the Cavendishes, who one was a sea captain, and the other was a well-known scientist in Queen Elizabeth I's court. And I had a cousin of mine that traced back my mom's family tree, and we go back to the same Cavendishes. You see, it becomes such a small world, and you never know it sometimes. Right. I guess I was privileged, though. Lawton Chiles, when he was a U.S. Senator, we got to know him back in the early 60s, before he ever got his first seat in the legislature. I was on Sam Gibbons's first steering committee when he got elected to the Florida legislature, and then went on to be a congressman. Got to be very close friends with Sheriff Malcolm Beard, who had before that was constable and was police chief at one time at the city of Tampa. But the night I got elected to city council, instead of being at one of the TV stations and I was sitting there watching those TV stations, and I started getting nervous because the numbers started going this way, up and down, and I said, "Hon, I don't want to sit here and watch all this." He said, "Well, you want to go down to the TV station?" "No, I want to go out to the sheriff's." And so when I was finally declared the winner of the District 7 council seat, I was sitting out at the sheriff and with his wife, Mary Ellen, and we were having our own little party.
Well, what led you to a career in politics? What motivated you to even get involved?
A lot of it had to do with little things. Try to walk to school with kids to the neighborhood schools. My children went first to Sulphur Springs School and then to Van Buren Junior High. And the streets, in the conditions, I mean, we still had some sand streets. I lived where I lived behind the shop that faced Bush Boulevard. I lived the other side of the railroad track on the dead end of Mulberry Street. And it was sand. They'd come around maybe once or twice a year and throw a little oyster shell on the street, run the machines down there and the grader and flatten it out. And the next thing you know, as soon as they flattened it out and broke all them oyster shells up, there was dust from everywhere. You'd take and dust your house today, and the next day is filled with dust all over the place. It was horrible, and there were no storm sewers. Forget that. And the little kids, a couple blocks down, those little, we were kind of in a mixed district. 2 blocks away was the beginning between there and Nebraska Avenue was a large black community. And down from Bush, just the block south of Bush Boulevard, Skagway, all the way down to Waters Avenue was all black folks. And they were over to the other side of Nebraska and went to where the interstate is now. And the interstate broke the district up again and went back to white people. And that's not the way I was raised at the beginning. New York's not that way. You live where you live, whether you're, regardless of race, color, creed, or anything else. And we all went to school together. There was no segregation up there. It was something I had to get used to for a while here, but we got these ditches along the sides of the road where the storm water run off, and you'd have a big summer rain, and those kids, they wouldn't let them into the swimming pool down at Sulphur Springs, and those little kids would be trying to swim in those ditches. And it bred mosquitoes. It was not safe, and it was not healthy. And I just, I used to come down to City Council maybe once a month because we had been annexed into the city of Tampa after it got voted down on a referendum. The city still wanted the property, and so the legislature did it. And here we were out there, a part of the city of Tampa. They ran the city line out as far as Fowler Avenue. They kept saying, well, we'll have better police protection, we'll get paved streets, whatever. And it never happened. And time passed from back in the 50s when Sulphur Springs and that area was annexed to Tampa. And the time I started running for office, well, a lot of time had passed and these improvements weren't done. And I felt like, well, what are we paying our taxes for? we need it done. And so the whole idea coming down and all the time, everything running on deaf ears. And okay, so the next thing we know, it's like, well, I guess in order for this to happen out here and us to get something done in our area, one of us needs to run for this office. And even though the incumbent at the time, because my husband ran 4 years before I did, he came in third, and the incumbent came in second, and we got to be very, very close friends with the fellow that got elected, which was Conrad Johnson. And when I ran for office, they're the ones that did all my printing and everything for me. We just got to, we got to be close with the friends, all of the candidates that run and everything. And my husband, for considering only spending a few $100s, we paid the qualifying fee was the biggest expense we had when he ran. And still he got over 10,000 votes, which wasn't bad at the time, not with 6 candidates running. And the incumbent, believe it or not, at the time, we used to buy all of our paint and masking tape and a lot of our supplies from the incumbent from that district, because that was the business he was in. So it wasn't any animosity as far as, you're trying to do it because you got a grudge against. It was trying to do something for the area. And when my husband came that close, he said, next time, he says, you do all the griping, you do all the fussing. Next time somebody's going to run for office, it's going to be you. And it was.
Right. What was it like being the first female on council?
Oh, God. Like living in a fishbowl. You had all the eyes. I mean, we had, all of the at the time you had the Tribune and you had the Times, 2 separate newspapers, and competing with each other, but they were both owned by the same parent company. But yeah, it just, everybody was watching, looking to see, is she gonna mess up some way or another? She gonna, cause what? They didn't know. And I was close, very close to some of those incumbents that were still in office, which was Dick Cheney, Lloyd Copeland, and Lee Duncan. Those were the 3 old-timers that stayed in. I think Vince Malloy got elected for his 2nd term. And Dickie, of course, ran for mayor in Greco. So it just, they were just looking for a woman to make a big mistake, And guess what? It didn't happen. They were all very cautious around me for first few months. After that, it was just another member of council.
You were elected in 1971?
71.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
What was a typical day like at council? I know you say they were cautious, but...
Oh, yeah. Well, we had more meetings than present council does. We met twice a week.
Twice a week?
Twice a week, every Tuesday and every Thursday at 9 o'clock in the mornings is when we started. And it didn't matter how long that agenda was. You went through, if it took morning and afternoon, it didn't matter. We had set things come up one day, once a month. We met as the taxi cab commission one day a month, where we approved or disapproved application for taxi drivers. Had to do with just kind of we governed their rates long before it was made part of the Public Service Commission that we have, Public Transportation Commission that we have now. But we met once a month to deal with the zoning and licensing of people that wanted to sell beer and wine, liquor stores, and we modified the 3 new members of council that came on when I did. Was myself, Joe Cotvis, and Joe Chulur. And between us, we came up with some innovative ideas. We had to do with the ordinance that put the restriction as to if you were going to be a restaurant and were sold liquor by the drink, cocktails, whatever, that you had to sell. You got the restriction with an R, so that you had to sell more than 50% food, so it wasn't just another gin joint, or it was just a little better way to deal with where certain businesses were located. We also zoned things like pool halls, dance halls, where where there were vending machines that you go in, play pinball machines, and all this. There were all kinds of things, and we had them divided up. And our land zonings was one Tuesday night every month, and we usually had an average of maybe 25 to 30 zoning hearings each time we had one of those meetings. And at one point, at Mr. Chilura's suggestion, and we passed it, we took a moratorium on all land zonings for a period of 60 days. And during that time, we were looking over our zoning laws and trying to see if we could accommodate small neighborhood businesses without giving them a C1 or C2 designation that allowed them to put basically any kind of business anywhere. So that it just gave a little bit more, little tighter control of trying to keep nice neighborhoods not to be disturbed with a whole lot of noise from that certain businesses just comes along with, and try to distinguish, and we did the same thing with taking we came up with the IP zoning, so that we could say, okay, these are going to be office and professional buildings, and not lumping them in with condos and apartments and, all the other high-rise buildings. We wanted, so you had a difference between residential and professional, so you could tailor certain areas that would be good for your apartments and good for condos, townhouses. We adopted the PUD so they could have planned unit development where they had to get their blueprints and everything approved. We passed the tree and landscape ordinance so that if they couldn't just tear out these great grand oaks and try to plant around it, or if they could, and if they tore out smaller trees, certain kinds, if you tore out good trees, you had to replace as many as you tore out. And it was just designing different ways to have more neighborhood appeal and to protect the neighborhoods.
Well, what issues were more important to you, or most important to you?
I was very involved with, I asked especially for that to be assigned to that committee when I was first elected. I wanted to be assigned to public safety, which involved police department, fire department, because we worked in our business, we worked hand in hand. And I had people within those departments that could come to me and say, Kathy, our department needs such and such a type of equipment. And they could go to their superiors and it might fall on deaf ears. But they knew if they came to me that I would listen and further check it out, and, really evaluate the situation. And I was responsible for some changes in the city budget to put certain equipment for our police department, and to certain things that we needed parts for the fireboat, and it was going to take months and months and months to get them. And I came back and said, no, you don't need to do that. We got a place here in town that we can get a new clutch for that transmission in the fireboat. And, well, I knew where they could get parts, and I was getting some of the information from the people in the departments that would work with me, and I'd see that it, made this, well, you had to have cooperation with the different departments. And the other area that I was very involved in was transportation. Because, the city of Tampa bought the old Tampa transit lines out. And at one point, we got some new buses that we had lots and lots of federal dollars coming into the city of Tampa at that time, back during Lyndon Johnson's administration. Now that's going way back, but from that evolved, even though he went, out of office, but all those different pots of federal dollars continued. So we got a lot of grants and stuff. We bought a batch of new buses and parked one out here one day in front. And Dickie Greco and all the council members, we took a 5-minute intermission, supposedly. We're going to go down there and inspect this new bus that's sitting out there. And I'm sitting there laughing. I said, we can have all these new buses that we need, but if it don't go where the people go, it's not going to do any good. And Dickie Greco looked at me and said, well, Kathy, why are you concerned? Why are you worried about that? You don't use the bus. And whoa, excuse me, Dickie, how do you think I get to City Hall almost every day? Because I did. I rode the bus downtown. Every time I came downtown, I rode the bus and I rode out. at the end of the bus line, didn't go that close to my place of business. And once I got to the other end of the Florida Avenue route or the Nebraska Avenue route, I'd have to use a telephone and get somebody to come and pick me up. So, because it was too far to walk from the end of the routes. But, and I made recommendations for certain routes to go from Northgate Shopping Center, which now is Home Depot, and a few other stores are still there. But to go from there out to University Mall. Not every bus that the city of Tampa is running needs to all go downtown. We need cross buses at, like along what is now Martin Luther King Boulevard, and across Hillsborough Avenue. I was the one that came up with a whole bunch of those bus routes, and they tried it, and they made money with it. And it was my idea that suggested the express buses to fill them up in 2 or 3 spots to bring the people downtown and then back home in the afternoons, to run them at certain times of the day as expresses. And it worked. But at first I got laughed at, like, and the
Well, what were some of the achievements that you are most proud of from your time on council? I know you have many, but if you could just name a few that you are most proud of.
Most of the things that I actually did, you probably won't even find in the city of Tampa records, because I did things behind the scenes and quietly. And whoever got the glory got the glory. I was responsible for the Mickey McGuire Recreation Center up at Roman Hiawatha, that property being donated to the city. And it was a good piece of property, worth a good bit of money too. But I went to Dick Greco and I walked in the office and said, "Mayor, how would you like to have a new recreation center?" That gave him the location. He said, "Kathy, you know we don't have no money in no budget to build such a thing." I said, "I didn't ask you that. I just asked how you'd like to have one." I said, "Because I got the folks that are willing to give the building and the property to the city. And they just want me to handle all the paperwork with negotiating with the city to how to go about giving you all the property." And then he got real excited. I was the present law on the books that governs the city clerk's office, the current one, is the one I wrote after year or so after Henry Williams had the legislature make that position appointed, when Bill Stark had been for years with the city as city clerk, and he retired, and Francis Henriquez was appointed to take over. But after she ran for office and got elected, and then Henry decided that next year that we're going to make this position appointed. And so it was done in the same old way, just the mayor appoints who he wants, when he wants. No real guts, if you will, no protection. I mean, it did not provide, not because it was Francis, anybody could have been in that position. They didn't get any of the benefits in the way he wrote the statute, or the way he submitted it to the legislature, to have any health insurance, vacation time. Frances had paid into the pension fund for years. Well, you were not allowed to do that anymore. And there was just so many. That office was just, it was a quickly written little thing and not well thought through. So Billy Poe was sitting as mayor at the time. And of course, Billy and I went way back to Hillsborough High School. We were in the same homeroom, so we knew each other real well, and I could get in to see him anytime I wanted to. But Henry came down, because he was still city attorney, and he came down to Billy's office to go over what we were going over was all of the bills that the city of Tampa had an interest in, whether they were bills submitted by the city or bills submitted by the county or members of the delegation. We were going over all of the bills that would reflect on Hillsborough County. So Henry says, "Who submitted this bill for the clerk's office?" And I'm sitting there, well, I did. And so Henry said, "But we don't need that. We've got, a perfectly good system. The person's appointed by the mayor, like other department heads. And the person sitting in that position needs to be someone. I don't care whether it's man, woman, black, white, green, or yellow. It makes no difference. But whoever is in that office at any given time needs to be responsible for the cohesion, to make sure that the records are kept straight and that things don't disappear." Well, but this says, in order for the mayor to even take and want to change it and put somebody new, it says that the council has to confirm it if he wants to fire someone. I said, well, he or she, because I'm not just looking at Billy now, I'm looking at the future and the continuity. So he said, but the mayor, he can't just fire a city clerk. You got to have just cause. And Billy looked up, you had to know Bill Poe. He could say things with a straight face and crack you up. And he looked at Henry, that straight little face, and he said, "Just cause I want to." And it wasn't probably 6 months, maybe a little bit longer than that, till he did just that. He just asked Henry, "You've been here for 35 years. I think it's time you should retire." Well, it's just one of those things.
You noted during your time in office that there was a time when you served on council that you had 4 mayors in 1 year.
Yep.
How did that happen?
Well, that's the year that Nick Greco decided that he was getting, coming close on 40, and if he wanted a good job for, the future, he wanted to be able to support his family the way he'd gotten accustomed to it. So he took the job from that DiBartello offered him, who was involved, owned a football team somewhere in the country. I don't even remember which one. But he also built malls all over the country, which Eastlake or that park is today is one that he had built. There are others. I believe that University Square Mall was originally built by D. Bartello. Anyway, when he resigned, it automatically, according to our charter and rules of succession, whoever is chairman of city council automatically gets sworn in as mayor. It depends on the length of time, whether you require a special election or if it's a shorter term, they just serve, they can run, they can do whatever. So anyway, Dick Cheney became the mayor. And Cheney was running for a full term of office, speaking to the Medical Association down at a luncheon at the Sheraton. And I, unfortunately, was the one who was closest to Dick Cheney than other people in City Hall were. And they didn't know what to do or how to get a hold of Dick's wife to notify her. So they called, and Beverly Scacola, who was our administrative aide at the time, came and said, "Kathy, you're wanted on the phone." And they told me then that Dick had had this massive heart attack, and they didn't know how to get a hold of his wife. And I knew that she worked in one of the lunchrooms for the school board, and I said, there's only two ways I know. One, you need to have to contact the school board and find out which school lunchroom she's working at. Or I said, you get a hold of David Barksdale, who was the head of recreation department. I said, Dick's daughter Becky worked for the recreation department. And I was very close to Cheney, and I was extremely upset. And I came walking back in to the council, and here was the council members at the time. Cheney had announced that he was going to run for mayor. Then Vince Malloy decided he wanted to run. Then Cockfist decided he wanted to run. And I walked back into council chambers, and here they were, Malloy and Cockfist going at each other. And I looked at Lloyd and I said, Mr. Chairman, I need the attention of council. And he stopped Malloy and Cockfist, and he says, what is the problem, Catherine? And I said, sir, I said, we need to have someone from the clerk's office arrange to swear you in as mayor. I said, Dick Cheney had just had a massive heart attack, and he's gone. And I would like to have the council have a couple of minutes of silence, each in their own way, to say a prayer for Dick's family that's going to be left to deal with this whole situation. And it was a hard thing to deal with, but automatically we needed somebody from the clerk's office to get a hold of one of the judges who usually administered the oaths of office to come over and install Lloyd Copeland as the mayor. So that gives us Greco, Cheney, and Copeland. And then, since that year there was an off year for council's election, but it was an even year to where the county was automatically holding fall elections anyway. So we arranged to, instead of, we didn't have the capability under our charter to allow more than just a few months. So we had to call for a special election, which at that election is when Bill Poe was elected as mayor. Yeah, you talk about a wild campaign. You had Cotvis, you had Malloy, you had Bill Poe, Bobby Martinez tried his first time around and didn't make it then. Made it later on, but not then. And we still didn't have the mechanism. We didn't have Sandy and Jan and Charlie during that special election. We filled the seats that we had open on council due to each one kind of going up in status.
So you served with Sandy Freeman?
Yeah, with Sandy, Jan, and Charlie Miranda, that came on council. Because Cotvis automatically went off. They had to resign to run. Malloy automatically went off, same reason. And Cheney, because he passed away, so that left 3 open seats.
Okay. When you think back to your time of public service, were there any challenges or difficulties that you wish you could have addressed but were not able to do so?
Not really. Usually, if I wanted something, pretty much one way or the other, I found a way to get what I wanted. If I nominated someone for some outside board position, I usually had most of the members of council went with me. There was, here and there, little challenges, but nothing real serious. I got to serve like with the Board of Criminal Justice, and I served the state's juvenile justice committee that worked with the Hillsborough County Board of Criminal Justice, and that went along with my public background, working with police and fire department and public safety. Then I got to be chairman of the taxi cab commission when it was made county-wide, and I got to be appointed by the mayor to serve on TUOTS, which was Tampa Urban Area Transit, which now is known by the MPO, and I was the first chairman of the MPO. So it went along with the transportation aspect.
You were also chairman pro tem of council, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I became, by the time as we went through and got Lloyd Copeland as mayor, then Lee Duncan became the chairman, and I was vice chair, and I actually chaired some of the meetings when Lee had to be gone to a sports authority meeting or went off on vacation or whatever. It wasn't a long period of time, but I did it.
Okay, so that was the first also. You
Yeah.
were the first woman chairman pro tem.
Yeah.
Very good.
And then on top of that, of course, later on, when Sandy took over for mayor, when Bobby Martinez ran as governor, and Sandy had a big chunk of months left in her term, the council they asked for applications. I had not sent in an application looking for the position. They had something like 25 applicants for that position. That's when Helen Chavez and Haven Poe were sitting on council. Tom Vann was chair. Perry Harvey was on the board. Anyway, Eddie Cavallero was on the council. So I just was sitting by the wayside, and I got a phone call. Kathy, where is your application for the council seat that Sandy vacated? Because I happened to be then living down at Gandy in Manhattan. I was in Sandy's district. And I said, well, you know, I'm retired. I'm just taking life easy, going where I want to go, traveling here, there, and yon. I wasn't, wasn't even thinking about it. And, well, we want you to come down because the reason you are the best one qualified for that is because you have put in 2 terms. You know we're working on this 2020 plan and updating all the zonings, and we're going to be doing, a lot of complicated work that somebody that's never been on council before and doesn't know how we operate isn't going to be just familiar enough with the way we do things, and it's going to take a lot of extra meetings and extra hours of work to do all this stuff. And you can just come in, sit down, and you know what to do. You're already trained. And I was, well, okay, if you really want me to. And I never did submit anything in writing. I came down to the next council meeting and I said, well, ladies and gentlemen of the council, if I've heard from some folks that would like me to seek this position, and if it in your consideration, and I wasn't looking to use it as a stepping stone. I was retired. I never even thought about running for office again, which near the end of my term, I left an unfinished job. I was working on updating the licensing codes for all of business licensing. There were certain things that didn't make sense, and other, so many years had passed. We had exactly the same amount of prices. If we had a license, say, for this kind of business was $25 a year, it stayed that way for probably 20 or 30 years or more. And then we had other things, like when they threw out the one form of licensing that was on the books, the state Supreme Court ruled it as unconstitutional because it wasn't within our charter. We didn't have the powers to do that type of licensing. So we swapped it. it just got swapped over to, because the Supreme Court assumed it as a form of income tax. So we turned around and decided, okay, if we can't do it this way, then we'll put the tax on the inventory. What wasn't fair is if you were in a business, say you sold certain products, whether it could be sewing material, groceries, it didn't matter. Once a year, you were supposed to take an inventory and estimate that inventory, and you paid so much tax based on the amount of inventory that you had. Now, the problem with that was you had certain items that, yeah, you had fast turnover and things would sell. But there were other things that sat on that shelf for 5 years and maybe never moved at all, and you got retaxed each year over and over and over on the same item. That wasn't quite fair either. So we were working on revamping and trying to update and modernize the licensing code. Pretty close, because we had a committee made up of 3 members of council, as well as people from the business community, from different types of businesses that would have been affected by the inventory tax. So that we were looking for a fair way of maybe easing up a few dollars on some of those licenses that were basically next to nothing, and getting rid of this inventory tax, but still major big business, according to their level, you didn't do it by what their income was, which was the old way of doing it. You had to have some way of mid-balance, and if you had figured out if you were going to do inventory, then they had to kind of list items that they'd already paid an inventory tax on and only do it on new inventory. But it was a very difficult situation, and the legal language that we needed was going to be very difficult. So,
Ms. Barja, what do you believe the prospects are for women in politics in Florida and nationwide?
I think, especially with the situations we have economically today, women in government have got a little bit, they're more open to looking at the economy differently. The male components will say, and I don't care whether it's city council, county commissioners, legislators, Congress, whatever. They look at the big numbers. You got X number of $1 million and it's assigned to such and such. Well, nobody ever seems to think about these little dollars. We're going to buy this item for the department because we need it, but we only need one, and it's a small purchase. But you have to learn how to look at those little things. An example of that might see when we first bought the first car for the mayor's office, that they should have an executive type vehicle for, and it didn't matter who the mayor was going to be, it would be something that would be kept for a number of years. When it started costing money, it would get swapped out, whatever, and going to have a vehicle for the assistants. At that time, the mayor had 2 assistants. Okay. And goes way back when I first came on. And I was always one who looking to shave that little penny. In a home budget, you're used to doing the maximum you can with the least you have to pay. So I said, okay, it came under my committee. All right. I said, but folks, I don't want to pass this resolution. I don't want to vote no either. What I want to do is I'm asking that the chair allow me to do a little searching, and a little bit of work, research, and let me find out. I want to be satisfied. And well, all we're doing is buying 2 cars, there's nothing complicated about that. I said, oh yes there is. What I want to be sure of is that we did not design, and I haven't had time to check all the extras and stuff, and I want to check that. I want to know, is the executive vehicle is it tailored so it can only one manufacturer can meet those specifications? Or is it open to several different brands of vehicles? As far as the aides positions there, you're asking to buy 1 or 2 vehicles for the aides in the office. We buy police vehicles each year. We try to upgrade a certain percentage of the fleet. We do the same thing with the building inspectors. And so we're buying a lot of vehicles. You go buy 1 car or 2 cars, you're going to pay more. We need to take those vehicles and call our dealers who we got the last batch of police vehicles or the last batch of inspectors' vehicles and see if they will match those prices for, I just want to know, are we buying a Cadillac or a Volkswagen? And of course, between Cheney and Copeland, who were chairman and vice chairman at the time, Kathy's right, we're going to let her do this. And let her come back in 2 weeks and advise us. And so what I advised them to do, yes, the specs are open on the executive car. That's not a problem. And the mayor has decided to have the purchasing agents go back and try to get one of the dealers, because the police vehicles came from one dealership and the inspectors came from another dealer with different ones. We're going to try to see if we can get them to match those prices and which is the best buy for the city. So take those vehicles, take those 2 out of the resolution, have a new resolution just for the executive vehicle. And it was done.
Oh, very good.
And I mean, it was little things. So, especially you're paying attention, and sometimes it's not always that you're going to save money. There was a situation that we had bids come in. We had got a whole batch of new police vehicles, and we had bids come in for sirens for the new vehicles. What they were the little old mechanical sirens that were totally obsolete. I had a habit, anytime I went out of town, I went on my own vacations or my own business thing, had nothing to do with the city, I'd stop in at police stations and fire stations and who ran their transit systems. I wanted to see what was going on in other parts of the country. And I toured Atlanta, and they were so nice to me. They laid out the red carpet and took me around and showed me new vehicles, and their sirens were electric sirens, and the way they operated, you could take, and policemen in the car could turn around, and when they go to pull somebody over, they turn around, they'd throw the siren on, and then they'd come on with a PA system attached to the siren and could say, the red Chevrolet, up there, please pull over and stop. They could actually communicate with the people they were stopping. And the sirens had different tones. Instead of just being, it went up and down. It gave different tones, and you could actually, between the police department and the fire department, you could set those new sirens, the electronic ones, to emit different sounds so that you could distinguish, was that a police vehicle coming, or was it an emergency from the fire department, or EMS people. You could tell that. And I said, now, and Mr. Van Fleet, I believe was his name, anyway, the fellow that operated Central Garage for the city, he was the one who came up with the specification. And I called him up and I said, I'm asking you to withdraw this resolution, and instead of the manual sirens that we have, the best that's on the market, you go out for bids and get the good electronic sirens. And it was like, well, Miss Barja, these, the old manual sirens are only $25 a piece, but what you're looking for, they sell for like $225 a piece. I said, yeah, we just got a big hunk of money from the federal government to buy all those new cars. Why should we put something that's obsolete as a siren when our job for our police department is to, you gotta go out and you're dealing with the public. You're trying to catch people that are out there breaking the law. It's, it's their work, it's their job, and it's the safety of our people that we're dealing with, and they should have the best equipment, and not, why should we put out, so it's not a big pile of money, but why should we put out a whole pile of money on just junk that's sitting obsolete on somebody's shelf? But, it's just an attitude. I think women have more of an open mind and are more careful about dotting the I's and, crossing the T's and seeing, what am I really voting on? They're more apt to read pieces of legislation and know what they're talking about, instead of having their aides do all the work and then say, oh yeah, I recommend you to vote this way or that way.
I understand. Tell me about your dreams for Tampa. What do you wish for Tampa? You've been there, you're a trailblazer, etc. So what are your dreams for Tampa? If there were some things you would like to see in Tampa today, based on what you remember Tampa being like in the past, what would those things be? Talk about your dreams.
We're going to be looking at more and more building out. There's no way that we can stop it, because Florida is unique with being a state where we have a lot of retirees coming in. We have people who don't want to pay state income tax. We're friendly to inviting other people to come to Florida. We have good weather, we have, all these amenities out there, and come retire here. Well, what are we going to be doing, and what is our outlook of providing for all these people? And I asked a question at one meeting not too long ago that we were discussing how many, that, in 20 years from now, we're looking at the city of Tampa being increased by roughly another 400,000, and this, because city lines keep going out, we got new Tampa out there, you've got a lot of new growth there, and it's not that we need to have jobs, so we need to encourage businesses to come, but we have to balance that. And my concern, and the question that I asked at the last meeting that I was involved with, transportation, was, I said, okay, if we're going to make a place and we're going to provide transit systems for all these people we expect to move in the future, what's going to happen? Have you all taken into consideration how many of the farms are we going to allow to be developed to high-rise buildings and to provide transportation? Where are we going to get all the food and things we need to feed all these people? We can't just take away all these green acres that we got. We've gotten rid of so many orange groves, and as the county expands more and more, and the more we build, it's wonderful to have the people come in. But you got to be able to keep certain areas green and to still have some farmland so we can feed these folks. And I think that's something, as we look to the future, it's not going to be me. I mean, I'm over 80. I'm not going to be around too much longer. That's the Lord up there. But, we've got to start saying, okay, we know we've got to provide other methods of transportation. Not getting that mentality of everybody just go jumping in their car to go down the street to the grocery store or to the bank or whatever. They need to share transportation, and that's good. But on the other hand, we can't have all these tall buildings going all over the county and doing away with all the agricultural lands. We have to protect some of those, agricultural areas. Otherwise, you've got to import everything from where? And other states around us are growing too. So I think that's something we need to look more at, the protection. We protect our wetlands, we protect trees, and landscaping, but we need to protect those lands that are producing food, our strawberry farmers and tomatoes that grow, and the peppers and the various vegetables, because we actually grow a large amount of diversity of all kinds of food products, and we need to, if we're going to have a bigger population, we got more mouths to feed, so we have to look at that.
So we need to prepare for it.
Yeah.
What advice would you give a young person aspiring to be a future city council member?
I think you need to know first of all, if you just think you want to run for public office, you will say, oh, well, yeah, city council, I've sat in on one or two of their meetings. Sounds interesting. I could do that job. What I did at the time, and of course it was the old city charter that was, big old book. And on top of that, the entire city codes, all the laws that affected the city of Tampa. I doubt if any other person running for council did what I did, especially since I can't see that much. But I went through and either read myself with my magnifier, or sometimes I got my husband, sometimes I got the kids to sit there and read. But we went through the entire city charter, which of course had been renewed because it was obsolete at the time. But anyway, I read through that whole thing and through all of the laws that were on the books, all of the city ordinances that were on the books at the time. And it was so I could be familiar, with what does a council member do? It's a part-time job, but how many hours is it really going to take? How many other hats do you get to wear with different intergovernmental agencies? How much time are you willing to commit to the position? There's a whole lot of things that council truly, you're responsible for the city budget. Now, the mayor's office, they have their finance department and write up the budget for the mayor. Of course, it was interesting, the different ways different mayors kind of involved themselves with the budget. I was the only member of city council that, in most cases, that actually sat down with each of the department heads, and when they met with the finance director and submitted their budget, so that when all that stuff came before council and we heard the different department heads, I knew what all was going on and what went into the budget ahead of time. When Dickie Greco was mayor, I'd just go and say, Dickie, we need to do so-and-so and so-and-so and have this added to the budget in this department or that department. And it got done. It was not a problem. When Billy was mayor, we made actually 3 changes in Billy's first budget. And Bill came in and he says, okay, I understand that city council wants to see some changes in the budget. He's, well, this is how it's going to be, guys. And that was referring to all of us, male and females, because then we had 3 females on the council. So he said, if you got 5 votes and you can override a veto, then you can put it in the budget. If you haven't got 5 votes, forget it. It's not gonna happen.
I tell you. Well, listen, we're almost done. You were the 2013 recipient of the Josephine Howard Stafford Memorial Award. Tell us about that, and what do you think about that?
I think setting up the award was whoever was responsible. I know it happened during Dick Greco's time of office, second time around. I know Jeanette and some of the other ladies that worked very, very hard. The committee, I mean, they've done an outstanding job each year selecting the, a employee within the city that they felt were just needed exceptional recognition for the various work that's been done. And I've seen this grow from some of the very first ones back when we met, like in the mascot room or, downstairs, and we had a little snack afterward. It was a little small affair to just this wonderful, wonderful turnout. And each year, I think it's just wonderful to see that recognition being given, and in the name of Josephine Howard Stafford. You had to know Jo real well to know how proud she would be to have her name attached to this award. She was such a humble and gracious person. I met Jo Stafford in the early 60s, long before she became a city attorney, and she was vice chairman of the Democratic Executive Committee. And we just became very close friends. Long, like I said, long before she even, but that is one person who may have been just the first female city attorney. There's been many other female city attorneys since then, and that have gone on, to do great things, but Jo was unique. She didn't care how many hours it took, how long we went. She was assigned to city council a lot. And she got all the jobs that nobody really wanted, if you will, that the male attorneys didn't want to be stuck with. When we sat here on zoning hearings one night, we didn't adjourn. We started at 7 o'clock after a full day's work, meeting from 9 in the morning till about 4 in the afternoon. Then we came back for the land zoning, and we sat from 7 o'clock till 2:30 in the morning. Guess who got stuck with that job? Jo Stafford did. Never complained, never fussed, whatever. If we could ask her to get us a legal opinion of, whatever, it made no difference. If we asked for it, she'd get us an answer.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yes.
Tell me what is your legacy?
Oh.
That's our last question. What is your legacy?
I don't know. I'll be frank. I was involved in so many things that, like I said, I never really asked to get the glory for anything. I just, in the background, saw that certain things happened, And probably one thing that I could consider is that I started at a time when there were no other females in policy decisions in elected office in Hillsborough County, and that I kind of opened the door, showing that other women could do great jobs representing their constituents. It's a wide open thing now. You got as many women running for office, whether it's city, county, legislative, Congress. You just look at the numbers and the people that we have elected in Hillsborough County to different offices. Well, you've had 2 female mayors, Sandy and Pam. And I consider it a privilege to have known every mayor since Curtis Hickson. I'd never met the man. And that's probably the only mayor that I haven't met and haven't worked with in some capacity for all these years, right up to the present time. I happen to know the present mayor from way back when I was on city council. He was a great guy then, and he's doing a fantastic job for the city of Tampa. And I tell you, for folks out there need to keep their eye on Bob Buckhorn. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes on to become one of this state's governors in the future, or maybe U.S. senator, or, you know. I think he's just got the personality and the ability to get things done that makes us as a city look good.
I'm glad. I know he will be happy to hear that. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and the stories, and it is just inspiring. We appreciate everything, and we appreciate you. Thank you for being the trailblazer that you are.